Okay, so first of all, what is a civil liberty? Think of it as your protections from the government. This is the laws that tell the government that they can't mess with you. Also think about these as your personal freedoms. Okay, so where do civil liberties come from? Primarily they come from amendments. They come from interpretations of the Constitution based on Supreme Court cases, but we'll deal with that a little bit later. Primarily amendments, and specifically a few that we're going to focus on for this course. There's more, and you'll discover these as we go, but we want to look at the 1st, 4th, 5th, 8th, and 14th amendments for this course. Okay, so we're going to cover specifically each amendment in a couple minutes, but I just want to give you the broad overview. So what are your civil liberties? According to the ACLU, your First Amendment rights include the freedom of speech, association, and assembly. It means you can get together. You have the freedom of press and the freedom of religion. You also have a right to privacy. Although not explicitly stated in the Constitution, the Supreme Court has declared that you have freedom from unwarranted government intrusion into your personal and private affairs. You also have a right to due process. This means you will be treated fairly by the government whenever your loss of liberty or property is at stake, and this usually has to do with the criminal justice system. And you also have a right to equal protection under the law. Doesn't matter your race, gender, sex, sexual preferences, religion, or national origin, you're protected from the government. Okay, so what are your First Amendment liberties? Specifically, we're going to look at speech, which means you can say almost anything you want to say. We'll get into the distinctions a little bit later. You have the right to associate and assemble with whoever that you want to. This includes being able to protest against the government. You have the freedom of the press, which means the government cannot control the newspapers, the internet, or television productions, essentially. You have the freedom to choose whichever religion you like. And you have the freedom not to have a government impose their religion on you. These are all liberties that the First Amendment grants, specifically those 5. The Fourth Amendment also grants you some civil liberties. Although it does not explicitly say that you have a right to privacy, it does say that the right of the people is to be secure in their persons, meaning that the government cannot intrude on your personal or private affairs. The Supreme Court has interpreted the Constitution to mean that there should be no warrantless searches, meaning that unless a judge gives permission, police officers cannot go into your house, cannot hack your computers, cannot take away anything that you have in private. We'll take a look at the Patriot Act, which in the last 7 or 8 years has really affected our civil liberties. The Fifth Amendment. Okay, so the Fifth Amendment basically covers something called due process, which means that you are going to be treated fairly by the government whenever your loss of liberty or property is at stake. So if you get arrested and you have to go to trial, you have a right to plead the Fifth, which means you don't have to testify against yourself. They can't force you to testify against yourself. You can never be deprived of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law, which means the government can't just take away your house or your car without going to trial first. They can't deprive of life, means that they cannot kill you without you going to trial and being convicted of a capital crime. They can't hold you in jail indefinitely without a trial. Alright, and they have to notify you of your rights. Back in 1966, in a famous course called Miranda versus Arizona, you guys got something called the Miranda rights. So it's not enough that you have rights, but you have to know what they are, and the government has to tell you them whenever they decide to take some away. The Eighth Amendment. This says that you have the fair treatment by the government whenever the loss of your liberty or property is at stake, and you have equal treatment under the law. The Eighth Amendment deals specifically with once you are already in prison or in jail or incarcerated by the government. So you cannot be inflicted any cruel or unusual punishments. Now, the definition of cruel and unusual has been talked about in Supreme Court cases throughout the years, and we'll analyze some of those. But keep in mind, we all have different interpretations of what cruel is and what unusual is. As a civilized society, we still have something called the death penalty, which many would say is cruel and unusual, but many say is righteous and is necessary to make sure that citizens in the United States are safe from other people committing crimes that are worthy of somebody going to the death penalty. So we will look at the Eighth Amendment in one unit and specifically deal with what is cruel and unusual and your views on the death penalty. The 14th Amendment. This is the last one that we're going to look at today. For this course, This covers your equal protection under the law and your equal treatment based on either race, sex, religion, or national origin. Basically, this means you have a right not to be harassed or prejudiced against you from the government. It doesn't matter what race you are. It doesn't matter what gender you are. It doesn't matter if you are different than the powers that be and the people that are in charge. You have protection from those people. And when you think about this, you often think about slavery and the civil rights movement in the 1960s, because those both did a law to get people who are different from those that are in charge equal protection. So now you know, these are your primary civil liberties, okay? We're going to look at civil liberties that come from the 1st, 4th, 5th, 8th, and 14th Amendments, dealing mostly with specific liberties from within each amendment. We just covered about 10 of them. Those 10 is what we'll focus on for the rest of the year. Towards the end of the class, I will ask you what other civil liberties exist from different amendments, and so you'll have to be paying attention as you do research and maybe keeping track of those. I will also ask you to be thinking about the future of civil liberties and projecting down the road based on what's happening in the world today. How do you think civil liberties will be effective? And will we get any more civil liberties because of the things that are happening today? And that concludes the slideshow. And I hope that you learned a little bit about what your civil liberties are.